Well, good morning and welcome back to Stories from the Collection. You join me for episode 5 in this series. And I'm in a location using a combo and wearing a hat. And this wasn't the original plan for this episode. You might recall during my Park Lake campaign, I had mentioned that I was looking forward to sharing with you episode 5 in a very special location. I was just waiting for the water levels to return. They never did. The lake is actually still down and had never come up. Even with all the rain we've been having, the rivers are flying, and yet it's as though they just keep the lakes open and it's just pumping out through the St. Lawrence. There's literally nothing I can do about it. It's out of my control. But what is in with my control is actually to share with you another story in place of that one for the meantime. And this is, like episode 2, funny enough, a garage sale find that I turned into something glorious. I have here today a 1960s, 1970s resin-dipped fiberglass rod. Don't ask me who made it. That once would have been right here, epoxied on, just a simple piece of paper. And that's long since gone. Trying to find any information about this particular blank has yielded me very few results. I'm under the impression it could be a Browning, but regardless, I found it in a garage sale, and it didn't even look this good. All of the guides were smashed, they were corroded, and essentially it was completely useless. But the blank was still in good condition, and I decided, well, I've always been looking to do a project like this, to actually re-whip a rod. And my good friend Robin actually had all the materials necessary, as well as the machine necessary to slowly rotate it. And so I purchased it for $10. Starting to sound a lot like that Silster story, isn't it? For $10 I picked up this rod, and yeah, I took a winter to sort of acquire all the parts. I found those same guides, the same guides that were originally on it, on eBay, good old eBay, you know, and a guy was down in Florida and he had a set of stainless steel guides. And yeah, a couple weeks later I had everything I needed to put the rod together. I just needed to find the time. And finally I did find the time, and I put it all together, and the final result is this. And I mean, it is a beautiful, beautiful blank, and it can most certainly handle a big carp. And recounting a few stories, I remember the very first session I took this rod out, I was on a pretty big river actually, and a spot notorious for numbers. You could catch a lot of fish there, and I figured, well, now's my chance. So I went out. I remember it was either the first or the second fish. It was a gorgeous mirror, the first mirror I'd had that year. It was unreal. And I then caught a nice common as well, and then I caught a couple more fish here and there on it. And then probably my most memorable session with this setup was my birthday session last year. I was fishing with Conrad, and we were in a brand new spot. Never been there before. We had very little recon on it, and didn't even pre-bait. You know, it was one of those, you just show up, you're there for the session. You're not really there to catch fish. And I brought this with me. It was in the car. I kind of forgot that it was in the car from my last session. And we set up, we fished all night, and if you recall, if you follow me on social media, Conrad had a beautiful koi that night. Beautiful koi, orange and black koi. And we caught a few more carp in the night, as well. Both of us caught our personal best catfish, if you can believe it. And after all that, we woke up in the morning, beautiful sunrise, you know, and I decided, well, let's give that old center pin combo a try. Let's give it a go. Let's see what I can do with it. And I couldn't believe it. We had my rod in and Conrad's rod in, this one and Conrad's, and we had 5 fish that morning, and they all came on this rod. And he was downstream. It made 0 sense. But all the fish came on this rod that morning. And the highlight of that, you'll see the video here now, was a 27-pounder that absolutely brutalized me. It was a long fight, and the current was picking up, and it was a tough fish. It was a big fish, and proper river common. And yeah, that was an amazing fight. One of the best fights I think I've ever had with a fish. Amazing, proper scrap. So that kind of recounts the story of this rod and reel. Well, I guess the rod. The reel's, you know, a cheaper center pin reel that I've had for a number of years, back when I used to do a little bit more steelhead fishing, and I wanted to get into the center pinning. I thought it was a very exciting way of fishing. So that completes that setup, and for today I'm going to be fishing waggler fishing style, actually. So I've actually got my rig set up, and I'm pretty much ready to go. So I think I see some bubbling out there. Let's get this rig in there, and then we'll talk a little bit about this hat, because I'm sure you're wondering, where did he get that hat? That's a mighty good looking hat. Stay tuned. Now, onto the hat. Sure, you've noticed by now it's a bit of a novelty hat, and it has aged about as well as I have aged. A lot of rust and whatnot from the number of little spinners and doodads on here, and they've all sort of corroded over time. I think this hat got wet once. And, but yeah, if this hat's missing, I've gone fishing, which truthfully that message doesn't make much sense, because, well, if the hat's missing, they wouldn't be able to see the message, would they? Either way. Laid Back Fishermen's Association, 1989, and I'm sure my grandfather likely picked it up around that time. My grandfather was a bit of a novelty hat collector, and pretty much everywhere he went, he collected hats. You know, if he went to another country, if he went to another province, whatever, he ended up getting a hat. I never really found out where he got it from, you know, before he passed away in 2016. But this hat reminds me of the good old days up at Sandy Lake in the Kawarthas, where my grandparents had a cottage off of Adam Cummings Road. Beautiful, beautiful cottage, and it was a beautiful lake, Sandy Lake. And that's where my love for fishing truly began. And it was off that dock, catching panfish around this time in the morning, you know, just as the sun was coming up over the horizon. And I remember many a times going down, and I probably caught the same panfish 5 times in a row, but it didn't matter. You know, those were the days where it was just great to have a nibble at the end of your line. Sandy Lake was also the place where I first laid eyes upon a carp, and there was actually 3 instances that I saw a carp at Sandy Lake. There was one time right off the end of our dock right there where I actually hooked into one. I actually hooked one and broke off. Seconds later, I had no idea how to work a drag, right? Obviously, no idea. The second instance that I saw a carp, the next door neighbors to us, a family by the name of the Wilkies, hooked into one of the brothers and landed it. And it was probably only about 10, 12 pounds, but to me that was an absolute monster. I think I was about 7 or 8 years old at the time. So to see a fish that big, right, and knowing they were using corn, I found that very strange. But you know, I was like, well, I got soft plastics. Why don't those work? Bob Azumi uses them. You know, as we all had our childhood heroes back in the day. And then the third instance of seeing a carp on Sandy Lake was watching one swimming across a shoal, and knowing what I know now, it was quite a substantial one. Not entirely sure about what happened to the carp of Sandy Lake, to be fair. A lot of reports said that after the die-off, some 2,000 floated up dead. It's quite a sad, sad state, and we don't really know how many are left. But perhaps one day, I'll have to just find out for myself. I can also remember the day that this became mine. It was a school play coming up. I was in grade 4, and I was to play a fisherman in the play. How fitting. And my grandfather laughed and said, "Oh, I've got just the prop for that. Remember that old hat that you love so much?" I said, "Yes." and he gave it to me, and ever since then this has now been in my collection. Well, I know what you're thinking. He just absolutely blew it. But it turned out I had a serious turtle problem, and that was what picked up my rig. I was in need of a move. Well, update time. You can see I'm in a new location. And you might be like, well, why? You just had a float drop. It was a turtle. In fact, there was a lot of turtles in that bay. And I just could not seem to get the carp to come in tighter to the margins. So with that, I've decided to change up my location and try something else. And I've now come to a pretty fast flowing river, to be fair. But that also means I have to let go of the waggler method, but that is okay. Sometimes we have to make a few changes in order to achieve our goals. And well, this video just wouldn't feel complete without a fish. So I've gone with a traditional bolt rig setup here, very short little pop-up. And I know this spot can usually do a fish or two. So let's hope. Well, it's away. It didn't take long, and it's away. And I've got a big river I'm fighting up against right now. The spot is not notorious for big fish, but a fish is welcome nonetheless. My arm is already burning. This fish is just holding its own in the current right now. Hard to know how big it is, really. When you're fighting water that's moving this quickly, it's sometimes very, very hard to know. But I think I am winning here, very slowly. If you haven't tried carp fishing on the pit, I really recommend it. What an exciting way to enjoy this sport fish right here in Ontario. What an exciting fish. It just goes to show it pays to move sometimes. You know, I was not catching fish where I was, and I had put in a baiting regimen. But sometimes it just comes down to being at the right place at the right time. This fish is not giving up. It is a very good fish. I just got my first glimpse of it. Oh, and I just felt the fin hang. Oh my god, I lost it. Oh, those moments that take your breath away. Oh, my hand is cramped in this position. Oh. Well, there's a fish in my net. Let's get it up on the mat and let's have a look. Well, finally, we end the episode with a capture. Oh, and a big shower. Beautiful fish, beautiful male, and what an iconic scrap. Beautiful fish. Let's get this one back, and we're gonna call it a day, because I'm white.